little context. Please tell us a little bit about yourself. And right now, please tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll come back to your college experience in just a little bit. Does that make sense? All right. James Heidelberger, a 2020 grad. James took a number of my classes, so I know James fairly well. He was also my TA in my, was it the Heroes or the, no, it was a science fiction class. So James Heidelberger, if you would introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. It's actually nice to see you now. My name is James Heidelberger, like John said. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a senior quality analyst tester at Activision Blizzard. I've been working there for 2.5 years now, and I have been involved in the shipping of Call of Duty Cold War, and as of this last Friday, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. And that's just a little about me off the bat.
All right, thanks, James. Next, Farad Williams. Farad is a 2020 grad as well. Farad.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here with you guys. So a little bit about me. I'm in programmatic advertising, so marketing and advertising, with a company called Matterkind. I've been with the company for about a year. And it's basically the buying of selling of ads. So any ads you're seeing while watching TV or scrolling on your phone, we're kind of behind that.
Awesome, thank you. And our third panelist, Alex Perrone, a 2018 graduate here of St. Penn's. Alex.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex. I am not working. I'm a third-year medical student at the University of Minnesota. So using my English degree in a slightly different way.
And we're going to hear about that in a little bit. So 3 different industries, okay? 3 different types of jobs and or careers that we'll hear about today from the same major, if you will. So I'd like to start the panel discussion, if you will, by asking each of the 3 of you, and you can jump in, go first, second, third. It doesn't matter who goes first or second or third. I would like you to describe for us the process that you took to become an English major, okay? So what led you to being an English major, and how that English major impacted or affected your decision to do what you're doing now. Does that make sense? We'll come back to the specifics in a little bit, but a little background on how you got here, your decision-making on how you got to where you are now. Does that make sense? All right, Alex, since you're on the screen, how about we start with you?
Sure. So I think for me, I picked up English as a second major, actually, like the end of my sophomore, beginning of my junior year. The first English class, like elective that I took was clinical encounters. My ultimate goal was always to go to med school. So I had a particular interest in that course. But then I really enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. Took a couple more classes and eventually was like, oh, I guess I'm just going to have a second major because I can't stop taking English classes now. And it was a nice change of pace, like breaking up all the hard sciences, to have a different style of teaching and interacting with your classmates. It was a really nice break for me too.
Cool. James?
Yeah, for me, I came into my CSBSJU experience undecided. I was thinking about being a history major, actually. And then I was very lucky to be put in first year seminar with John, and then also History in Americas with Yvette South. Both were amazing classes. And that kind of like started my interest in it. But then what really kind of sealed the deal was I took a creative writing class with Jessica Harkins, and she asked if I wanted to be an English major. And I was like, well, that's as good of a sign as any. that maybe I'm in the right place. And then how it affected my desire to end up where I was, it's actually kind of funny. I was taking another one of your classes, John, the business and writing one. And we were doing an exercise of just like researching jobs in the area. And I happened to stumble upon Activision Blizzard hiring. And I was like, oh, well, that would be interesting to maybe just apply to after college. And I ended up doing that. And now here I am 2.5 years later, still working for him.
Farad.
Yes, so I started out as a theater major, double major in theater and English. So I kind of always went back in between both. Those were two things I was both passionate about at the time. And then before I started my senior year, I just decided to do a theater minor and went over to an English major since I was already taking both courses for those two majors.
Okay, so all three of you, how do you use your liberal arts degree in your current position or in your studies headed toward your doctoral degree, your MD, Alex, in your case? But how do you use your liberal arts practically? How do you use that degree in your current place of employment? Think about that for a second. And we'll start with Alex's. Oh, no, Alex started the last time. James, we'll start with James, and then Farad, you get to start the next one.
That's a great question, and it wasn't something that I really was sure about when I was going into the job. You know, the video game industry, it was going to be a lot of testing the game to make sure that there aren't any like bugs or glitches. And so I wasn't really sure how much I was going to be using my English degree, but it turns out a lot. Because every time that we find a bug, we have to like write up a pretty detailed report. We have to be pretty specific, you know, make sure that all the periods are in place, just to make sure that the bug is good to go, easy to read for the developers. And that's kind of where I started out with using it. Now that I've been promoted to a senior position, it really helps because I help review the bugs before they go out. And so being able to, you know, once you've been in English class for a while, you're pretty used to being able to like scan through paragraphs quickly, you know, see if any punctuation is missing. I also send out a lot more emails now, just for like reports that all need to be formatted in a correct manner. So that was like the main one. The main soft skill I would say would be being able to give feedback well. You don't realize it, but just with how many times that you get like put into like small groups and then asked like peer review, it's a great way to practice getting feedback, which is something that I've found maybe not everyone is as experienced as in. I've gotten some pretty terrible feedback while at Activision, and it really made me appreciate how much practice you get when you're going through the English major.
Farad.
I'm using it a lot in my field. So you're learning how to critically think in my position. As I mentioned earlier, I'm in marketing. So there's a lot of strategy and planning for campaigns. So you're collaboratively working with the team, brainstorming on ideas, figuring out what's needed. You're sending out a lot of emails, fast paced. So you have to be able to read those and make sure that they're good to send out to folks that you're working with. Leadership skills, communication.
Good. Thank you. Alex.
I think I used it a lot when I was trying to get into med school. You have to write a personal statement, which is like 1,000 words or so of like why you should get into medical school. So you have to use those 1,000 words like really well, because that's the only thing that they really see you portraying about yourself to get into medical school. So I think that was the first big one. And I felt like it really helped me a lot because I was able to organize my thoughts and decide what was important and what could be thrown out when I was drafting it. And then now I'm on my clinical rotation, so we chart all day long, like documenting things about patients. So I think that helps as well. And then finally, I think just the conversational skills and being able to, I don't know, I feel like my English degree in particular helped me think in a different way and communicate with people differently from my hard science brain of like sequential, I don't know, it kind of gets you out of that cycle of just scientific facts and like, let's study all these things that we can and be able to talk more. So. Yeah.
Alex, can I follow up on that?
Of course.
Thinking in a different way. What does that mean? Why would that be important becoming a medical doctor or in medicine? Why would thinking in a different way rather than in some other way that you are used to, why do you think that's important?
I think it helps you like back out of the corners you can get yourself into. Like I reflect a lot on like the writing process and how when I was first learning how to write, especially creative writing, I had a really hard time like letting go of stuff I had written down, even if it was trash. I'm like, oh, but I put so much work into this paper, and I'm like, but it's terrible. So you can just scrap the whole thing and kind of start over. And then you get to the end product and you're like, oh, this is what I was really trying to get at, but I just had to go through this whole entire process to get to this goal. So I think it helps a lot in medicine, because if you're going down the wrong trail, you need to be willing to let it go and come up with a new idea.
Farad, can you weigh in on that? On thinking in a different way, how you talked about being in the theater before you hit the English department. Can you talk a little bit about thinking in a different way because of English / the liberal arts?
Yeah, I think you just, you're able to gauge differently with all these different diverse backgrounds that you get with your degree and with the liberal arts education. So you don't necessarily have to major in a specific thing, but you can still find ways to be relatable to it. So like, for instance, with my job now, I have to know a little bit about diversity because different audiences that we work with, African Americans, Latin Americans, knowing about their age group, what kind of content they're looking towards to help them buy the sell or the campaign that I'm working on. So that's kind of how I think about it.
So Farad, can I follow up here?
Sure thing.
So you talked about, you mentioned two things that I know that I talk about in my classes. I know Dr. Malone and Dr. South both talk about these in their classes as well. The importance of audience analysis. Who are you writing for and why you're writing there? And the amount of research that you have to do, preliminary research, before you look at who your audience is and blah, blah, blah. Can you comment a little bit about that in your work with advertising, on the importance of the skill of looking at who the audience is and identifying audience in terms of what you might have learned here at CSBSJU?
Absolutely. It's definitely extremely important to know who your audience is, who you want to target specifically. I mean, there's millions of dollars on the line, to be honest. So you have to know who you want to target and specifically how you're going to target them. I was in a meeting yesterday, and there was a team that I worked with, and they weren't able to relate to the clients or relate to the clients how specifically they're going to reach that audience or how they were going to target that audience. So it's extremely important to know that.
Yeah, audience is again, as you all know here, and the three of you know, audience is paramount. James, Farad just mentioned this, but James, you also mentioned this, the ability to work on a team and the importance of defining your role on that team and then working and getting along. Can you comment a little bit about working collaboratively on a team and those types of skills that you might have learned in the liberal arts and here at CSBSJU?
Yeah, absolutely. Working on a team is very important. I think no matter what job you're going into, but especially at my job, we have I think 400 people on our project right now. So a lot of
What can you describe what your project is again, James?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, we just ended up shipping Modern Warfare 2, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, this past Friday. And then not this Friday, but the next Friday, we're also releasing like a follow-up called Warzone 2, which also has a mode called DMZ. But we're working on getting that out the door right now. So there's about like 400 of us just in Minnesota. There's a lot more, obviously, like between our LA and Texas offices as well. But so we really have like a lot of different teams, like both, like I said, locally, and then we have teams in LA and Texas and Dublin, and we have to make sure that everyone is kind of like tackling their tasks, both in the micro and macro scale. So like in the macro scale right now, we have it kind of set up where it's like, all right, well, Texas handles the single player side of things, and then Minnesota, we handle the larger scale testing for the Warzone mode that's coming out in a couple weeks, and we've been doing that for the past year or so. So we have like very defined roles, and I think that's very important to like help make sure everyone knows what they're doing. But then even like on a smaller scale than that, I, as a senior, I currently lead what we call a squad, which is about like 18 people. And I have a couple other co-leaders as well, Jordan Biddle and Michael Barrett. And we oftentimes we would just have a little group chat off to the side, and we'll be like, all right, you're going to take these 5 people and you're going to tackle this. I'm going to take these 3 and we'll tackle this. You've got the rest to tackle this. Which I know it's like, it seems weird with the English major because you're like, oh, we don't ever do that as an English major. You're just kind of, writing papers. But, sometimes you get like projects in class where it's like, okay, we need to put together this diagram. Or I remember in one class, it was like, you have to put together a play. And it's like, okay, so now we have to very quickly, in the space of 20-ish minutes, define roles, make sure that everyone's doing their part, and then follow through so that the product comes together as a team. Which, like, we also touched on my comp sci major, but like some of my other classes that I took here, I can't say that I got that like defined team setting other than like for maybe some group projects. So that was one thing with the English major that I thought was largely beneficial.
And the third, Alex, could you weigh in on the importance of communicating writing as a on a team, as both Farad and James in the industries that they're in, advertising and software development? Medical is a little different, or is it? And could you comment a little bit about writing and or communicating on a team?
I think as a medical student, our roles change a lot as you progress through medical school. So being able to communicate back and forth with like your advisors on, okay, so now we're at this stage of training. Where exactly do I fit into this healthcare system at this stage? Like, what can I do? What can't I do? So I think it's really helpful in setting expectations. And then also, this is a little not as much teamwork, but I was just thinking about it as the others were talking. Communicating with patients for sure. Being able to quickly read like what their comprehension level is and be able to explain like these confusing medical ailments to people in plain language is something that a lot of my peers and even attending physicians kind of struggle with at times. So myself as a med student will be like, they have no idea what you're saying because we're so deep in the medical jargon that it's hard to realize unless you're really making a conscious effort to be aware of it. And then just being able to communicate that thing, like to notice it as one thing, but then to change it into language that people can understand, I think is the next challenge. Use a lot of metaphors with patients. So I don't know, I feel like I got a lot of useful skills in small groups and things like that during my time at St. Ben St. John's.
Alex, can you talk a little bit about using those metaphors? Because we ask students to think about metaphors and comparisons a lot in our as you read and as you apply those to your own writings. How practically the use of metaphors and comparisons do you employ those practically in your own practice? You just mentioned working with patients. Could you give us an example of something like that?
I don't know if I can think of one on the spot, but I know I use them just about daily with patients. I don't know, my current clerkship, I'm kind of switching services all the time. So sometimes I'm working with neurology, sometimes I'm working with surgery. So I think it's really helpful when talking about anatomy. Let's see, I can't really think of one. I'll have to think about it for a minute.
That's fine.
But yeah, I use it almost every day. So I think it's, you go and you're reviewing a chart and deciding what you're gonna, also like agenda setting. I think it's really helpful with that. So you're reviewing a chart and like trying to compile all this information and say, okay, these are the 3 things we need to for sure talk about. And then kind of on the fly thinking of how am I going to explain this to a patient. We did an exercise recently in med school where we had to design a patient handout, and mine was on hepatitis C, and we had to write it at a 7th grade reading level because that's the majority of the patient population. So I thought that was really interesting, a little bit challenging for me. I thought I nailed it, and then it was like 10th grade, and I was like, darn.
How did that go? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because we actually talked about that a little bit, at least reading levels in my class. You talk a little bit about explaining difficult subjects, explaining difficult topics in a way that's clear and concise.
I thought the exercise was really challenging, but it was also a nice reminder that even if I think I'm doing a good job of making it simple, it still can be simpler. Like I said, I thought I totally had it down to 7th grade, and it was like 10th grade. So it made you focus on different things, like the length of your sentences. If it's too many words, like people just can't process them. So making it short and succinct is, it's a skill. And I think we get backwards, especially in medical school. We're trying to make things like so extra and make it sound as smart as you can and make new words for things that don't need specific medical terms for them, but there are. So when you write it down in a chart, it's different than when you're explaining it to a patient. If you just read it how like we're reading it and processing it, it's not going to make sense.
Farad, can you comment on that in the advertising world? Do you run into having to revise and explain? I know that you have to explain difficult things in 2 or 3 words sometimes. And have you run into that in your business and in the advertising world?
Absolutely. When we're like putting creative and ads together, we're always looking at the characters and whether this word fits or whether we need to take that word out. I was just doing that yesterday, actually. There was a whole list and we needed to shorten it. So I was like taking out words and rewording things. I also forgot to mention earlier, I'm taking this kind of copywriting course to become a copywriter. So it's teaching me also how to really hone in on just specific words and painting the picture with just few words as possible.
Awesome. James, can you comment on that as well? Explaining difficult things in more understandable terms?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Activision, when we're looking for bugs, there are a lot of times where we'll find things that are simply not consistent with reality. And we have a set list of terms for things like that. Sort of like, you know, something disappears entirely, we call it like culling, for example. And then there are some things that there just isn't a term for, and it's just like, oh, there's an eldritch abomination on the screen. There's nothing I can do about that. And people will message me and they'll be like, I don't even know what to call this. And so you have to kind of be able to think quickly and be like, all right, this is a quick, succinct way to describe it to the developers in a way that kind of like that they are able to understand. And there's a real art to it. And then also, even for the regular bugs that we encounter, you know, there's an art to being able to just describe it very succinctly within a sentence or two. One of my teammates on my previous project, Cold War, one time just wrote up this huge bug that was like 2 paragraphs long and had all this extra information. And I was just like, you've got to cut that down. The devs are not going to read that one. That is going to be a will not fix for sure. So we took like 10 minutes, just sliced out sentences and cut out words until it was like, you know, a smaller, more readable, digestible bug.
Okay, so in working on a team, okay, and working, so we ask, I'm sure that James, Farad, and Alex, you all in your English classes and or liberal arts classes, you all had to go through peer review and work and get and give feedback. Okay. In your current positions, can you think of ways in which the getting and the receiving and of the giving of feedback that you experienced here has come into play in your current jobs? And I'd like you to think about it in terms of how you used to receive feedback and how you and what you thought of that feedback, and now when you get feedback, how you feel about getting that feedback now. Okay, students are reticent to do something with the feedback that they get. At least in my class, you are. I know you. Okay, but does that make some sense? What do you do with the feedback that you get, and how do you feel about that? Farad, let's start with you.
Sure thing. So when I was at St. John's, I kind of thought of feedback as, you know, just reading somebody's paper and just scribbling all over it, making all types of notes and annotations, do this, do that. And then I came to the realization that you don't really have to take every revision or review into consideration. It's more about what your point of view is and what changes you think or feedback you want to take from it. It doesn't have to be at all. In terms of advertising, I think like when we're creating a plan or for a campaign, I might make a suggestion. How about we use this specific vendor because they're good with, let's say, behavioral targeting. My manager might say, well, this partner, there's going to be a better CPM or such and such. It's going to be cheaper to go with them. So what's the benefit? So really kind of considering the feedback and using it. What's the best way the feedback is going to benefit you overall.
Alex, can you weigh in?
Yeah, so during clinical rotations, we get feedback every single day and we have to document it. So I think it's really helped me be able to kind of ask follow-up questions. Like, I just won't accept like soft feedback anymore. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, that's not helping me. Can you give me a specific example of this vague thing you're talking about so I can actually put it into something tangible? So I think it's made me more comfortable for sure, just having more conversations with feedback and not just being like, okay, I'll just take a good job. What was good? Was my patient interaction good? Was my documentation like really concise? What about this interaction was good? So I know I can do it again. So I think just being able to ask follow-up questions and then also just decide when you want to just let it float off your back. Like, oh, I don't know. Maybe they saw it this way, or maybe it's a technical thing. Like they chart this specific way and it doesn't actually matter. It's like stylistic. So learning to what's good, what's bad, ask more questions, and then that you don't have to accept it all if you don't want to.
James?
Yeah, I think when I was at CSBSU, it took me like 2 years to realize how like valuable feedback is. A lot of times you get feedback in classes, you're just kind of like, okay, yeah, that we did the peer review, it's now going aside and I'm going to continue writing. But I think at some point I really started looking at it being like, oh yeah, no, this is a lot of like very helpful feedback of just like ways to expand on the points, ways to clarify. And that really helped me grow in my writing while I was at CSBSGU, which I was very thankful for. Especially there were so many talented majors and minors that I got to work with on the daily basis. Was one of them. And then just through classes being able to develop more. At work, I already mentioned that some people are not great at feedback at my job. One specific example is I had an Excel sheet that we were using, and someone messaged me and they said, "Are you still accepting feedback on this?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely." And they said, "It sucks and I don't like it." And I'm like, "That's not feedback, but thank you. I'll take it into consideration." Um, um, so we've that being said, there have been a lot of good feedback as well. Like I said before, we kind of help look over each other's bugs and things. Especially now that I'm in a senior position, I get to help my team with looking over bugs. And there is a real art to being able to look at what's wrong with something and then being able to, or what could be improved even, not necessarily even something's wrong, but just being like, hey, this is something that can make it better. And then being able to relay that well. Especially because sometimes people aren't always open for feedback, unfortunately. And it's just like, oh, but this would really help you. And so just being able to just be like, hey, you can take it or leave it, but this is something that I think could help improve you and help you be better. And just being able to relay that well and in a way that is confident and kind, I think is very, very helpful no matter where you go.
So for the last 15 minutes or so of today's panel discussion, I would like to open it up for student questions. Do you folks have any questions, commentary, what you would like to ask any of the three panelists? Panelists, you can see are your esteemed colleagues here in the room. Thank you for bringing that up, Yvette. Questions, comments for people. If you do have some, I encourage these questions. If you would hop up here and speak into the microphone, then the recording can pick it up and the panelists can absolutely hear it. Does that make sense? Questions? Come on up, state your name, which class you're from, and give your question. Perfect, thank you.
Hi, I'm from Cindy's creative nonfiction class, and this is mostly for James and Farad. But when you started the job search for post-college, like where did you begin and how did you even know like what to look for, if that makes sense?
That is a great question. So I graduated 2020, so during the pandemic. So everything was kind of shut down. I just started, I knew I had to find something. So I was just searching for pretty much anything I could find. The first job I went into was actually sales. I did that for about 8 months and then I was just burnt out. I realized sales was not for me. And then one of my friends who went to St. John, his brother was in advertising. He said his brother's job was hiring. So I connected with him, got an interview with the company, and pretty much snowballed from there. So I would say it's really, you can search for pretty much anywhere, any job you want, but it specifically comes down to is who you know. Are you networking with people with the industry you want to be involved into? How often are you, going out to coffee or meeting up with people, depending on where you are in the cities, meet with alums, email alums on a weekly basis. If you can do that, I would highly recommend doing that. Just finding a mentor too and shadowing them and what they do as well could be helpful to figure out what you want to do. And again, you also don't have to have your whole life figured out. It's just getting to that point in life and then finding the next person that's going to help you get to that next point, and next point, next point.
For me, it was a little bit, I was very, very lucky. I also started in the pandemic. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to create a short list of things that I want. And then like the fallback was still working at Target, because I was just like, a job is a job. If you got to, work at Target and stock toilet paper before people rip them off the shelves, That's fine as long as you're, working towards doing whatever you want to do. But very thankfully, like I said, I was in a writing business class, and we were just told to, like, search for potential jobs. And it was a weird realization of being like, all right, what are things that I like? And I'm like, oh, I really like video games. I think that they're a wonderful medium. I wonder if there's anything just even open. It doesn't have to be in the area. This isn't something I'm going to have to apply to because it's probably not, I thought like, oh, I wouldn't have the specifications for it, the qualifications, that's the word. But then just, searching for it, I found the job. I realized I had the qualifications. So I would say, like, number one thing, just realize that, if you enjoy something, someone has to make it, or has to be involved in some way. So don't be afraid to just, go online and search, X thing jobs. But then also, Farad made a great point. I will reiterate it. I will steal it and reiterate it. You do not have to have it figured out right after college. Like I said, that's honestly, I think it's a good thing to, if you have to work retail for 6 months, 2 years even, while you're, figuring out, or like going to extra classes or just like looking for other jobs, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I loved my time at Target, mostly, other than some customers, but that's just the retail experience. So you do not have to have it figured out immediately after college. You have time still if you want to do something first and then kind of work towards it.
Yo, I'm Logan. So I'm from Milan's class. My question is, did you have to convince the people who were hiring you that your job was important for the craft that they're trying to, I guess, how much did you have to, like, convince people that, like, my English degree matters in this profession, or do they actively seek out like that kind of expertise?
Alex, can you,
Sure. I think for medical school, I talked about my English degree more than almost anything in my interviews. People were like, that's weird. You have a degree in English? Because everybody is biology, chemistry, which I also had bio, but nobody cared about that because everybody applying to medical school is a biology or chemistry major. So it started a lot of conversations, and I felt like I had much more to talk about. I was able to show like who I am and what I'm interested in a lot more through the English avenue than I'm really pretty good at science, just like everybody else trying to get into medical school. So I think it definitely, I don't know, it helped me a lot.
Farad or James?
Yeah, I can hop in here. So with my job, usually most people have marketing degrees or some type of advertising degree. So I kind of really honed in on my English skills, my theater skills, combining those skills and seeing how they were able to be relatable in the marketing field. So.
And then for me, they weren't really like seeking out English majors or anything in particular. And I didn't necessarily make it like a stress point. I definitely brought it up as well as my comp sci minor as like a selling point, but it wasn't a focus point. But what I think is most valuable about it is just being able to express yourself well. Even if you don't have to try and convince people like, oh yes, I am, I took English and this is why that is good. Just being able to, as you're doing interviews and when you're doing the dreaded cover letter, being able to succinctly talk about yourself is a real quality that people notice when you can do it well, which is something that you can practice, I think, most with the English major / minor as well.
There you go. Yeah. I'll sing.
Morning. My name is Zach, English minor with Professor Malone's creative nonfiction class. But my question is, like, when you're not on a panel and, like, in all honesty, like, how often do you, like, are you in your job or you're in medical school, you're just like your field, you're like, man, good thing I was an English major, because now I can like genuinely, when you're not being asked questions of how your like English major has helped you. Because I feel like a lot of times we have like when we pick our degrees, we're like worried about like where I know there's like some number about like how many people actually use like go into the field that their degrees in. But that's not what I'm curious about. It's more just like when we kind of pick our degrees, we're kind of like, oh, now we're gonna be in this thing and we're gonna only like need to utilize like these skills. But like that doesn't seem to be the case. So like how often are you guys like, man, good thing I took that intro class and I kept with it. Does that make sense? That cool. I'll leave it at that.
That's a great question.
I'll start this one off. I've been going last recently. I am very thankful that I took the English major even when I'm not on a panel. I think that you learn a lot of very cool, like I took a lot of very fun classes. One that's really stuck with me was Yvette's Haunted Americas. I was watching Haunting of Hill House and I was just like, oh my goodness, there's these 3 different ghosts and they all mean different things. It blew my mind. I was so excited to just really dig in there. It's just things like that where I was just like, oh, I learned about this in an English class or like John's sci-fi class. Even creative writing. I was doing some like, creative writing the other weekend. I'm like, this is fun. I really enjoy this. So, even though that I'm not maybe using all of those, I'm not doing any creative fiction while I'm at my job. I really enjoyed the classes that I took, and I thought that I learned a lot of really fun things that even if I'm, just watching Netflix, I'm just like, oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, to add on to what James said, I'm thankful for the English courses I took. One of the courses that really stuck out to me is what John Kendall recommended earlier. Writing essays really saved my life. Showed me how to be a really good writer, how to keep your writing, how to keep people engaged in what you're writing. So right now I'm actually trying to get ready to write another play that I've been working on. I'm just figuring out, how this line works, how this line doesn't work. What do I want from this character? So all those skills you learn in the classes kind of also come back to you at some point in life.
I think I'm like really glad I did it, but I think it's because I'm in a field where not a lot of people have been able to have the same opportunities as I did in undergrad. Like for pre-meds, a lot of time it's just like a grind and it's gross. But I think like when I picked up the English as a second major, it was kind of like a relief. I was like, oh, wow, I get to use the side of my brain that I really genuinely enjoy using. Like I get to read. Well, and I'm almost forced to read in some ways, which is good for me because I was too busy to like leisurely read. So it gave me an opportunity to do that and have like a purpose to it. But then I graduated and one of my friends and I took some kind of poetry class. I'm kind of old. I can't remember all the classes specifically, but and I thought I was going to hate poetry. I was like, oh, this is so hard. Like I hate writing poetry. It's really terrible. I don't know how to do it. I'm bad at it. And then I ended up loving it and I still write poetry, and my friend and I like sent each other weekly poems when we're both in medical school. So it was just kind of like a fun little thing to do. So I don't know, maybe I'm an English nerd, but I definitely don't regret it.
We have about 5 minutes left. Any more other questions? Final thoughts from our panelists, practical advice, theoretical advice, any advice for our students here and or posterity, because we are recording this. So let's start with Farad, Alex, and then end with James.
Sure thing, a lot of advice here. Don't be afraid to take risks. Don't be afraid to fail. When you fail, you learn more and you learn how to improve. Make sure you keep a journal. Make sure you write every day, your goals, your aspirations, what you want to do in life. That way it's constantly embedded inside of you. Like I said earlier, make sure you're networking, sending out emails to people who you're interested in the industry, meeting with them, shadowing them, mentoring with them, and don't take life too serious.
Well, that's kind of difficult to top. I'm just gonna say, don't be afraid to like wing it and not know what you're doing. I feel like, especially as a med student, people are like, oh, you have your shit together. And I'm like, I definitely do not. But there's kind of like a beautiful part of that, that you just don't know what's gonna happen. And I feel like when you start embracing that, you just feel better, like life becomes easier. I took 2 gap years before med school that were kind of unplanned, and I just like winged it through those 2 years. But I think they were some of the most formative years, and they're going to make me a better doctor and a better person. And I wouldn't have had them if I didn't have some challenges that popped up unexpectedly. So I think kind of leaning into those things and finding ways to grow from them will be really helpful. And then also, you guys, if anybody's interested in medicine, feel free to reach out. You can use my email. Someone has it, I'm sure.
We have it.
Yeah, that is very hard to follow up from both of you. Holy cow. I got the difficult job. I would say while you're still in college, enjoy your time there. You know, hang out with friends, take classes you're interested in, take classes you're not interested in. You know, sometimes you'll just take a class and you'll be like, I had no idea I was going to find this interesting. And sometimes you get the most out of those. And then sometimes you don't like him, but that's fine. You know, you swing and you miss sometimes. I think that's another good lesson. You know, you're not going to hit every shot. Be prepared to sometimes just you face plant and there's nothing to learn from it. You just got to get back up and keep going. In terms of things that have helped me, I would always recommend just like keeping a list of things that you want to do. For example, but you probably can't see behind me, but I have a stack of books about this big that is my to read pile. Keep something, just be like, this is something that I am working on. You know, it's nice to cross it off the list, even if it's just I'm reading these pretty quick and easy novels, or being like, I want to try these recipes. Just keep your hands on things that you're interested in, and have fun. It's not everything's super easy. You know, we're just coming out of this 2-year kind of weird pandemic-y time frame, and things are getting back to normal. But you know, really appreciate the people around you. Take time to really appreciate the small things and just have fun with it.
Very good. Folks, help me thank them for giving of their time. And thank you all for coming. Angie, you want to wrap up?
Thank you all for the fabulous humans I'm meeting on the screen, and the fabulous humans who I'm meeting here in person. I did take a class from Dr. Malone, and she did encourage me to be an English major, and I didn't. And I have always wondered, like, I think that was really, truly one of my missed, like, oh, she might have been right, but that's okay. So I'm hoping you hear minimally, it's one step at a time, right? It's soaking up all the classes you can. You have these amazing people surrounding you here. We also have, there were some conversations about mentorship. And so we also have a program called Interaction. And so there is information on the XPD website, as well as both St. John's Alumni Relations and CSB Alumni Relations. And it's a way to get connected to alums from St. Ben's and St. John's. So thank you all for joining us today. And let us know if you have questions. And I do have your emails. So again, even as Alex said, if you like, or any, I encourage you to connect with them on LinkedIn too.
LinkedIn too, yeah.
Very good.
Thanks all.
Whatever's easiest, whatever's best. Thank you.
Thank you.